Hey everyone, my name is K1 and this is my fourth series of my Blender Masterclass. In this series, I will go through 10 methods or techniques that will accelerate your Blender workflow. This is pretty much everything I wish I've had known sooner. It would have saved me a lot of time, and as you know, time is the most valuable currency. With that being said, let's get into it. The first technique I want to talk about is something called append. Now, I use append more than any other tool. Say you finished some projects and moved on to the next one. Now, you realize that you need one of those elements that you used in the earlier project or you created in the earlier project. What do? I used to make things very hard on myself by recreating that element from scratch. Obviously, I didn't know any better. However, using append is a much better and simpler approach to accomplish this. You can append almost anything, not just objects, but materials, collections, and so on. For example, here, let me just go to render viewport, and as you can see, just add some light here. As you can see, my material has nothing on it yet, but I want to use a material that I used in the past, or let's say a previous project. And to do that, all I have to do is just go to File, Append, and go to where your Blender file is. So now here I have my Blender file. All you have to do is just double click, and here you have all the different things that you can pretty much append. Like if you want to append HDRI, you can do that. Object, palettes, whatever. But in my case, I'm going to go to material, and here I have this material that I want to append. Obviously, it's much better to rename your materials so you can differentiate between them, but this is me being lazy. Now, all you need to do is just click on it, and here you have append, and you have imported that material. If you're gonna go to your plane, create new, and then look for material here, and you should be able to have that surface material. Pretty helpful, right? Otherwise, I would have had to recreate all these nodes in the shader tab, but simply that's something you can avoid doing. This is more like a technique I use when things get a little bit out of hand. Blender is one of those software that at some point it makes you feel like your computer is about to explode. In other words, the more stuff you add to your scenes, the heavier and slower it gets. So to avoid that from happening, this little icon can be very helpful here. It's basically called globally disabled in viewports. It's like it has this kind of TV looking icon, and it's very helpful. So in our case here, we have a very heavy scene. As you can see, it's not as smooth when you move around. Let's go to the viewport here. And obviously, because we have so many particle grass, and if I want to, let's say, add a cube and play around with it, model a bit, it's gonna be very, very slow. And this will just slow down your whole Blender workflow process. Now, what I would advise you, if you play with the same plugin, which is called Botaniq, I would advise you just click on it, and it could be any other object, by the way, and just hide it. You know where it is, you're happy with the result, just hide it and turn off display modifier, global, whatever you call it, and just do the same thing for all of them, and you'll see the difference in a bit. All right, now we can already see the difference. All right, now they still exist. You can still bring them back anytime you want, but now you can just do other things. Let's say you want to model this a bit. Smooth, right? And now let's say you're done with your modeling. This is a very silly example. I don't even know what is this, but you can bring back your grass easy as this. And then you can render. So this will just make your life a little bit easier when you have so much going on your scene, and yeah, take advantage of this little TV icon. This was one of those techniques that I was very happy when I found about it. Now, there are times you might want to mix two shader. For example, you want to mix two different surfaces. The main reason for doing that is to add more realism and imperfections to your surface, as well as the unique look you might get out of it. So let's say, for example, you want to create a sand surface that is a combination of two different surfaces. For this example, I'm going to use Bridge Quixel here. And here we have a few different type of sand surfaces, but I'm going to be using Thai seaweed on sand, as well as, let's just go with Thai beach sand. Okay. And now if you go to our plane, by the way, if you don't have a plane, just add a plane here. Here you can simply go ahead and click new on the shading tab, but I would just rather to go to the shading tab here. It's just much bigger. So let's just click on the camera viewport to see what we're doing. So basically here we should have both sand surfaces. And first off, before I do anything, I'm just gonna rename this main surface as ground. All right. Now to mix both shaders, first of all, I'm gonna delete the principal BSDF. This is the default one. And then just go to Thai Beach Sand. And then here you have a terrible looking shader because apparently Bridge Quixel, they have some issues with connecting the nodes and they haven't fixed it for a long time. So I learned this the hard way. So if you're using Bridge Quixel, if you have the same problem, make sure you just look at the image here. It's called roughness. So it has to be connected with roughness, and this normal should be connected with map, the normal. As you can see, you have this very ugly glossy look, and to get rid of that, you just have to add more clear-cut roughness and maybe just bring down a little bit of specular around here. Now, after you're done with that, all you have to do is just copy and paste all the nodes except the material output. So Control C, you copy, and then you go back to ground, and then you just paste it. Now we're gonna do the same thing for the second sand surface we have. Again, we have to kind of fix this. All right, so here we have something like this. All right. Again, we need to just go and copy all of it except the material output. Control C, and then go back to ground. Control V, kind of separate them. Bring the material output here. And now to mix both of them, Shift A, search, we have Mix Shader. As it sounds, I mean, shouldn't be that of a surprise. So you connect the second and the first shader, and then you connect to the surface. It's easy as this. Now you have both, like as you can see, you have both surface connected and they are like blended together. You can obviously play with the fact here, which one you want to show more, but I want to keep it in the middle. But what you can play with, you can add if you go here, Shift A, color ramp. This is a very interesting tool that you can play with. So if you connect the color to the fact, here you can slightly adjust them depending on what kind of look you want to go for. And you also have fact here. You can still play with fact, which one you want to show more. Now you see this adds a very slight imperfection that sometimes you lack in your scene. And I really like that. Now, obviously you can go crazy. You can bring two more surfaces. You can go as far as you want. You just have to add another mix shader. So two mix shader and connect all of them and just then connect both of them to the surface. But the point of this to show you that you can actually mix two surfaces, which is great. Now let's go ahead and add an HDRI from Blender Kit. All right, so as you can see, this is pretty much how it looks. It might not be the best example, but now you can show your creativity and kind of like mix as many shaders if you want. Another way to expedite your Blender workflow is by bookmarking your folders. Before, I wasted so much time just going all over the place looking for different things in different folders. As you work with Blender, it's pretty common to have a lot of folders and assets to play with. But when I learned that I could just simply bookmark those folders I use the most, I was just a happier person. So as you can see here, I save some of those folders on the site, and those are the folders I use the most. For example, VDB HDRIs, cars, my main folders. And let's say you don't know how to add these. All you need to just go to the folder. Let's say, okay, let's just say this. And then you press this plus icon. And if you want to delete that bookmark folder, you just press minus. And you can also adjust them where you want to be ranked. So yeah, it's pretty simple and it's going to save so much time in the long term. So I highly recommend you to bookmark those folders that you use the most. Adding photos to my scenes is another method that I use to accelerate my Blender workflow. This is especially helpful if you want to reduce the amount of space in your scene, as well as to add more realism and details to it. A great example of adding photos to your scene is by adding backdrops. I usually use backdrops that are further away from my main objects and elements, and in our case, it is the house. So let's go ahead, File, Import, and here, Image as Plane. Now, if you don't have this enabled, go to Edit, Preference, and go to Add-ons and just search Image and make sure you check on Import, Export. It's a long name, but Import Images as Plane. Now, go back to Import, and here you should have this option, Images as Plane. Then here I have Blender Guru, Pro Lighting Sky. I use these backdrops a lot, and they have some pretty seasonal backdrops, pretty much fits for anything, but our scene is more like wintry with the fog and everything, so I'm just gonna choose one of these winter looking. Yeah, this one, I think it will fit. So just now you have imported that image. All I have to do is just scale it up. Bear in mind that the photo has to be PNG, and that way you have it ready. And just let's say I'm just gonna, all right. Now, this might not be a really great example, but you can see the difference now. It's much more realistic. It's more believable. It's a realistic scene. And you can use the same method in other scenes and just play around. Very, very helpful as it doesn't take much space in your scene, and it does a really great job to add that extra touch of realism before, after. Slight adjustment, but big difference. So you can definitely be more creative with it. Cavity is an option that you can check here near the viewport shading. And if you go down here, by default, the cavity shouldn't be on. So I'm going to keep it turned off for now. I just want to create a quick modeling cube to just showcase what I mean. And if you go here, press I, quickly create something like this. All right. Now, as you can see, we have a model cube, and when you go around, you can see that the corner kind of disappears when you go to a certain point of the viewport. It's not always clear where are the corners. So cavity definitely helps. If you go here and turn on cavity, and you can see the corners clearly, no matter where your 3D viewport is. So it's definitely helpful, and it just doesn't take any space. And I highly recommend it that you also turn it on. It's just a simple step, and especially if you're into modeling, and this is definitely something you need to do. Quick Favor is something I recently discovered, and I personally use it when it comes to Shading tab. You can obviously use it on your 3D viewport as well, but I find it very helpful here if we go to Shading tab. Now, I use some nodes on a daily basis, and what I used to do every time I would need a node, for example, color ramp, I would just go search color ramp, right? It could be time consuming, especially if you're creating lots of nodes. So basically here what I did, I went to add, and here you have all your nodes, and you can basically choose any of them and just right click on it. And here you have add to quick favorites. And if you press Q, basically I've already added some of those nodes that I usually use. For example, color ramp, mix shader, emissions, noise textures. These are the nodes I use on a daily basis. By the way, am I pronouncing nodes the right way? I don't know. Nodes, but you get the point, right? So every time I need something like, let's say, emission, I just press Q and I just get it. Very, very fast, very quick. All right, so that's for shading. You can also get back to layout. You can pretty much add anything to your quick favor. Let's say, for example, Shift A, and you want to add creating a cube to your quick favor. So all you have to do is just add, let's say, press Q, and then you have cube there. It's just a fast way. These are for basically the things you use the most, and it is very, very useful. Now, what I did here, I added 3 of them: shade smooth, object, parents, and cube. Object parents is something that I really like. For example, I'm just gonna add another cube, and here I'm gonna select grid and a cube. You can either right click parent, object parent, or you can just press Q and object parent. Now they are connected together, you see? So that's pretty much it. But one thing to remember is to save preference, otherwise you would lose all your quick favorites. So go to edit, preference, and here you have this 3 lines, and make sure to click on save preference. And whatever adjustment you make, whatever you add to your quick favorites or delete, make sure to come back to preference, save preference. That's it. A 3D viewport can be really annoying sometimes. So when it comes to going around over your objects, I usually like to lock my viewport to the cursor. So here, if you go to your view tab, you have lock to 3D cursor. Yes. And now your viewport will be locked to the cursor, as you can see here. And you can basically change the position or the place of your cursor to wherever you want to focus. So for example, if you're modeling something here, it's best to put the cursor here and just go around. So you see, like, whatever you do, it's just gonna be focused on that area. You go zoom out, zoom in, it's going to be locked. On the other hand, if you don't have this on, it's just going to be all over the place. And sometimes you lose yourself. You just go to different directions. And I'm pretty sure it happened to many of us. So this is something you can do. Check on this if you like to keep the focus on one area. I have mentioned how helpful this can be in the previous series. But for those who still haven't heard of this technique, startup default is basically a default setting you set every time you start using Blender, or every time you run your Blender software. This will save you hours in the long term, since you don't have to redo your adjustment every time you run the software. As you can see here, I have like 3 section tabs open. First, this one is like just the shading tab, the shader editor, where I basically use a lot and I don't have to go to shading tab every time I want to do something with the shading. So I just zoom in, do whatever is needed. Here I have my render viewport, where I can see what's happening in the rendered viewport, and here I just play around with whatever I need to. Obviously I have a big monitor, so that really helps. I'm not sure if when it's come to laptop this tabs will be ideal, but I have all my adjustments saved as well. So every time I go back to a blank project, I have everything set the same way. So all my adjustments are set the way I want to, so I don't have to touch them. Even the camera is there with the ratio I want. Everything is set. So it definitely saves a lot of time. To simply make your default startup, you just have to do your adjustment, do your settings, whatever you need to do. Whether you like it this way, you can just get inspiration from this. For example, if you want to close this, just right click, close it. And if you want to add another one, you can choose different tabs, different type of, whatever you feel like. I'm just going to go back to shader. And here you just have to go to file, you have default, and then save startup file. Once you do that, you click on it, you go ahead and create a new blank project, and you have the same look and setting. Organizing my objects is something I recently really care about, mainly because when the scene gets too detailed, when there's a lot of objects, I do want to know where I can find these objects for any kind of reason. And a simple way to rename all your objects is just to select on the object. Obviously, you can go ahead and look for the object, but it will take a lot of time. For example, which cube is the one you want to rename, right? So a much better way and simpler way to do is just select any object and just press F2 on your keyboard, and then you can rename this, for example, I don't know, sun. And now you have it renamed. So you can do the same thing for the rest of the objects. F2, and you can rename them. I think this is a great way to organize your object without going through all your objects here, which can be very time consuming. Thank you so much for making it till the end. It really means a lot to me. These were 10 tips, or you can say techniques, that have kind of helped me on a daily basis to truly expedite my Blender workflow, and I wanted to share them with you guys. However, I know I could have added more techniques, more tips, more tricks, but I thought I would just make it short and just put the things that I truly use on a daily basis. And these are the accumulation of that. So hopefully it's helpful. If you want me to make another version of this, let me know. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask, and I'll see you guys in the next one.